I'm Shruti Bharath. In 2021, I had my beautiful son, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But I also realized that it was an emotional roller coaster. I wasn't ready for all the changes that happened within me and all of my relationships. But I also realized I am not alone. I accessed a lot of great content during this time, but realized that there just wasn't enough from an Indian context. And I want to do something to change that. Last year, I set up Beyond the Bump, which is a fully volunteer-run platform. And as part of the content offerings of this platform, I'm starting a new podcast called Bump In. It's an opportunity to meet a lot of everyday parents who share their stories of how they're not only surviving, but thriving inside and after the 0 to 24 month phase. So join me as we talk about the highs, lows, the madness, and the inevitable challenges with some laughter sprinkled in between. Be sure to listen all the way till the end for some important takeaways and some resources that might help support your journey. See you soon. So hi Neha, welcome to Bump In, which is the name of this podcast. It's, as you know, something that we set up as part of Beyond the Bump, which is a fully volunteer-run support space, something that I'm trying to build with a bunch of people, including you, to help mothers like us figure out the 0 to 24 month phase. So this conversation that I wanted to have with you was to understand your experience, right? Everything that you've gone through. You have a toddler now, a lovely little boy. Just wanted to use this conversation to get to know you better and your experiences better. So we'll jump straight in.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Neha, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story?
I like you already know. I have a 2-year-old son, and I live in Bangalore, same society as you. Just for the viewers to know. Professionally, I have done my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad in a French MNC, marketing and all. And then I kind of realized that I want to have a family. So I want a job which would give me the flexibility to, not long hours like that, not in a corporate. So I decided to start something on my own. So now I make board games. I design them myself, sell them on Amazon.
It's fantastic.
And that gives me the time to be with my son.
Yeah.
Which sounds very hunky-dory right now, but we'll get into the details.
Not an easy choice to make after putting in the kind of hours you would have going to IMA and whatever job and all of those carrots hanging in front of you.
Yes.
Might not have been an easy choice to make, but sounds great. We'll definitely talk more about the board games. What about the husband? What does he do, and how are you guys sort of co-parenting and taking care of Riyansh?
So he's in PhonePe, in a good position. He earns enough that I don't have to earn, which is a very big support system.
Yeah, absolutely.
It allowed me to make this choice. And he's also a very good father. He's present all the times. He has throughout the pregnancy, in the first few months when it's tough, he's been there like nothing. And I've been reading a lot of these Western blogs and accounts, and I didn't. Parents, fathers are not. Expect. Yeah, fathers are not present over there.
Yeah.
They're not the same as mothers in a lot of these blogs.
Correct.
They have their stories, but
yeah.
I just felt lucky in this part of the journey that he was there
with you for everything. That's wonderful. So tell us about when you had your baby and what that was like. Where did you have Riyansh, and when was that?
That was in Bangalore.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah.
And this was somewhat during COVID. So in the middle of my pregnancy, the second wave of COVID hit.
Yeah.
So I was unlucky in some senses. There was no maid while the pregnancy was going on, and we had to do everything on our own. I was also lucky in some senses because when the delivery actually happened, that was not the worst time. The hospitals were open, we were able to go, but they were very specific that only the husband is allowed. So my mother was not allowed in the hospital to support us. So we had kind of ups and downs at that point. Also, my parents live in Delhi. His parents live in Lucknow, and they all have their jobs. So it's mostly been the two of us.
Yeah.
They came at very important times. My mother was there in the final stages of pregnancy. His mother was there in the early stages, when 0 to 1 month kind of thing. So they've been there. They keep visiting. We keep visiting them. But it's really difficult to raise a kid without your family around you.
It truly is, and I
It's
could
been-
totally relate. I had my baby at the same time. I think we're probably a few months apart in terms of when Surya was born, and not only was he born in the pandemic, October 21, but we also moved to another country 9 weeks later. Which now, when I think about it, I don't know how we did it.
Yeah,
'Cause I
that's
traveled in Air India with the baby, which is its own adventure. And also did that when you move to another country, you DIY, some very little support in terms of people helping out. So I totally understand, right? Whether you're doing it with one person or 10 people, it's still hard. But when you have fewer people, it's really hard, right? I have this math. I figured this out maybe about 3-4 months after Surya was born, that you need a 3:1 ratio. 3 people to 1 baby is the optimum
More
ratio.
than that, there will be fights.
Yeah, more than that, you probably have a crowd. 3 is right, because everyone gets a bit of a break and everyone gets to be with the baby and no one loses sight of the child, right? So somehow that 3:1 seems to be the right format.
Okay.
But you can do better than that, is what I sort of think, right? No, good to know that you also had your share of interesting moments. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, your parenting journey so far, and also what the first few months were like? Get into that a little bit.
So, I had a normal delivery, and I thought that means that everything's gonna be fine. I'll be healed within 2 weeks, and
Right.
great. But it was totally not like that. The first month, I have hazy memories. I remember almost nothing. I used to wake up, feed him, eat myself, go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And my husband Nalin and his parents were the ones who were just burping the baby, putting him to sleep, all of those things. I didn't even know how to change his diaper till he turned a month.
Yeah.
In all the movies, I just grew up watching that, pregnancy is a tough part, And I think
Everything
same for my
else is
husband.
easy.
So he was very patient, loving during the pregnancy bit, and we were enjoying it, we were excited. There were tough moments as well.
Yeah.
But then I thought that after that, you have a baby and you live happily ever after. And that's really not what happened.
That's when it starts.
That's when it started.
Yeah.
And again, in the first 6 months, we tried to be patient about it. So, we were like, okay, it's getting better. It did get better. I healed.
Yeah.
I was more present after a while, more aware of what was happening around me.
Yeah.
So it did keep getting better, but after 6 months, I think we kind of lost patience, because there's this postpartum depression that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
And this is something, I read a lot about it, and I didn't feel depressed. I didn't feel like I was not good enough to be a mother or anything of that sort. What I felt was postpartum rage.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find much about it, but I was just angry all the time about everything, and that was not me at all. I'm very chill, upbeat in general in life, so this was very surprising to me and to my husband, who's known me for a few years. So it wasn't ending.
Yeah.
Every little thing, and I could feel my blood boiling. I'd feel like tension in my nerves. I couldn't stop myself from being angry, and it baffled us. And after a while, we kind of lost hope. We were like, have I become this person? Is it ever going to... Yeah. Is it ever going to change back to who I was? Like a person you would want to be around. So that was, I felt, the toughest part.
Did people misunderstand you when you got angry at that point? Did they take it too personally? Did they not understand where the rage was coming from? Did you feel guilt about feeling angry like this? With
Yeah.
people?
So people, I think, were patient, probably because they've been through it and they just don't talk about it. I don't know what the reason
Or
was.
they didn't know what to do.
They didn't know what to do.
Right.
But I feel, at least in India, at least in my circles, my family, people were very forgiving in the first year. They kind of knew that it's tough.
The pressure's on.
Yeah. But also, I was not around people that much.
Right.
It was just my husband who had to bear me the entire time. And
Truly testing
he
the
was-
marriage.
He was patient through pregnancy. He was patient through the 6 months. And then the 6 to 12 month period kind of got too much.
Yeah.
Also, for me, I had an identity crisis.
Yeah.
If I have become this person who's angry all the time, who's just busy with one kid, not able to give time to my partner, not able to give time to my hobbies.
Correct.
My business, I dropped that in the first
I
year.
can
I was
imagine.
there.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I?
Who is this person? Who
Yeah,
is Neha?
yeah,
Is
exactly.
Neha lost in translation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the guilt was definitely part of that.
Telling us earlier about how you started this up, you made this active choice to kind of leave this tough corporate world, which is very unforgiving, and sort of move into a space where you have more balance. Now I know you've navigated quite a bit to get to where you are today, possibly overcoming the mom rage, and we'll talk more about that. But how are you dealing with things now? You have a toddler, he's over 2 years old now, started daycare, and how are you juggling that with your startup, and how is that working for you? Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, sure. So now obviously it's much easier. He is fine being around other people. He is, even when he's home, he's okay for about 10-15 minutes to play by himself. Then he wants me.
Yeah.
Earlier he wanted me constantly.
Yeah.
So I think the toughest part about having your own business, my ideas were just that, when he needs me, I'll be there. When he doesn't need me, I'll do my own thing. So I don't have to do it based on other people's deadlines. So that was the reason I started something on my own. But then I realized I have to do it according to his deadline,
Yeah.
And he always needed me.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he needed me in breaks. So it started taking a backseat, my work. And the toughest part then was to be able to draw lines, which feels more evil when you're doing it yourself than when someone else is making you do it. So if I get a call from work, I feel it's kind of easier to say that someone else, please take care of him, I have to take this call. But if I have to decide that I need to work because I haven't been able to do it today, then I feel very bad about taking that decision. So drawing lines over there was, the toughest part and also the best thing I did on both sides. So on the business side, I made it very clear that I will not be available after 7. 7 is usually when he would come back from playing, and then he would start needing me. And weekends I will not work at all.
Correct.
Which in your own business, it's kind of assumed that you'll work weekends.
Correct.
You'll be there on call if you're making a sale. People expect those kind of things. So on that side, I drew some boundaries, and then there were boundaries on his side. So I designated one room as my work room, and it's taken a lot of time, but now he knows that when the door is closed, that means I'm working.
Yeah.
So he's not supposed to disturb me. That doesn't mean he doesn't, but it kind of gives him this clarity on when I'm available for him.
Yeah.
When I'm playing with him, discussing things, learning together, versus when he's not really supposed to disturb. So now when he needs me, now I've got a nanny, which is
a separate conversation.
A conversation.
I have so many questions about what you've already shared. Yeah.
So now when he's playing with her, sometimes every half an hour or so he will want to see me.
Yeah.
So he comes, he opens the doorway slightly. He knows, I can see it in his eyes that he knows he's not supposed to be here. He'll just tell me what he's doing, and say okay bye and close the door. And God is so cute. But if I just
Melts your heart.
acknowledge what he is doing, then he gives me
He's
the space
okay.
to work.
Yeah, so many questions, Neha. So I think I want to share a little bit about where I struggled and ask you
Sure.
whether that's something that you had a problem with. Yeah, I think there's a very romantic view about work either way, right? You can say when you're your own boss that you'll call your own hours and everything will just be so perfect, but it really isn't, right? It takes a lot of discipline and focus to be able to do what you've set out to do. Similarly, I think being employed with an organization has its own merits and demerits where you can be flexible up to a point. I mean, the organization and yourself, but there's also certain hard deadlines, right? And it's what I found happening to me was a lot of guilt. Am I doing enough for my child during the working day, right? Is he getting a raw deal? Is and there was also the other flip side where I felt like I wasn't doing enough at work. So I've read this thing. Your moms are expected to work like they don't have children and parent like they don't have a job.
I know.
And I just don't get it because you can't be both, right? What has been your observations here, and how have you navigated this guilt? Because this guilt is a journey; it isn't a destination.
Yeah, it is.
It's high on some days, low on some days, but it's always there. Are you doing enough, right, on either end? And it ties back to the point you were making about your identity change, which I'll talk about. But yeah, what has been your experience with this? Parenting like you have no job and doing your job like you have no children. How does this work for you?
I think it's very unfair.
Yeah.
So I have issues with the current way feminism is run, exactly for the reasons you just mentioned. I think my views on this go back to my childhood. My mother was a teacher, so when we were back home from school, she was always there around us, and that's a choice she had made consciously, which I didn't appreciate for a long time.
Yeah.
Till I found a good friend whose mother was working.
Right.
And she used to be home alone. She was old. I mean, class 6, 7, old enough. But she was bored the entire day, waiting for her mother. And the way she used to talk about her mother, oh, she came and I was able to spend time with her. I mean, what do you mean by able to spend time with her? So I think that kind of made me very resolute very early in life. I think if you pick one out of the two, it just becomes easier for you.
Yeah.
If you're very sure that your career is more important than kids, then you don't have the guilt. If you're very sure that kids are more important than career, then again you won't have. The guilt comes from the fact that we want to do both equally, and that's not just society, that's also ourselves.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So the fact that we want to do justice to both is where all of this is coming from. So I think irrespective of whether I'm working from home or guilt is something which I manage by putting my foot down. As soon as I start having that kind of a guilt, I put my foot down. I say, okay, this board game will not be launched this month. It will be launched after 3 months. I don't care.
Yeah.
If it affects how much money I'm able to earn, how much fame I'm able to get, how much self-satisfaction I'm able to get. There's a game that I've been trying to launch since June and it's still not out yet. But that's okay. Because when the guilt hits me, I put my foot down and make a decision. And I know it's not easy for everyone. Like I said in the beginning, my husband's support has been humongously responsible for the choices I'm able to make. But that's personally, since you asked me, that's how I deal with the guilt.
And it's a huge factor. I do think so. I think it's been a factor for me as well. I have an incredibly supportive partner who will daily encourage me to do what I want to do without the fear of any financial consequences. And that's a privilege we enjoy, that's for sure.
That's true.
I think for me, I've dealt with the guilt in a similar but different way. I think I had this this innate quality already of pushing myself very hard, and I think when I had my son, the idea of results and achievement had to change. So what I thought of as being good and best and a good performer had to change. The definition of that had to change. And it's funny, and I'm not saying this to be arrogant or cocky, it hasn't changed people's perception of how I work. I actually think that I'm doing better at work now than I ever did before, without killing myself, without letting go of my boundaries. And it's not it's not that I don't take my job seriously. I take it seriously enough, but I take my job of being a parent just as seriously. But I don't think this has been a straight line journey from the inception of guilt to now. It's been a lot of learning and working through it. And I think comparison kills a little. You know, when you start looking at other parents and you start looking at, especially women in media who are talking about having it all and doing it all, and you start to think to yourself, God, I have just one kid. How hard? I mean, they seem to be having it all, and you seem to be like struggling with the basics. And I think what the point you made is really clear. It's really a signal to say, hey, what works for me, right? Having that boundary is super, super important. So I think that's been something that's worked for me as well. Yeah.
And on your comparison point, I think definitely it's very, very important to not compare yourself. We say we shouldn't compare our kids, but we really shouldn't compare ourselves. And that has also been tough. So, like I said, my batchmates from IMA are in great positions. They're doing very well at work, and every time I meet them, it's kind of like, you know, you're the topper there. What are you doing with your life? I'm doing something better with my life. I have to be very confident of the choices that I have made and not compare myself to,
and not be defensive about it either, right? And not feel like you're being attacked. Or I know it's a lot of work to do while you're also doing so much other work,
but
like the logistics.
But I think it's also good because we learn so much about ourselves. We grow as people to be able to have the self-confidence, and it's a must now, to have the self-confidence to know that the choices you have made are right for you.
Correct. Yeah.
And you have the you have what it takes to change those choices if you ever realize that that's not what's ideal for you. It takes a lot of courage to make those decisions, and then it gives you a lot of confidence to, you know, just the fact that you were able to make them, to know that you made those.
Of course.
So that growth is definitely
important.
Yeah,
for sure.
Part of who we become.
These journeys that you've had, it's clear that it's very experiential, right? You've had these experiences, and that's how you got here. Like, you got here through the hard parts of the journey. But were there any resources that you looked up? I know you talked to me earlier about how in your pregnancy you did a lot of reading, and you know, you really educated yourself. But once the baby came, was there anything that you did to help yourself from a resource point of view? Anything you read, or anyone you heard or listened to, or anyone you went to for advice at that time that you think is a good place for other mothers who are in that situation right now to be able to go to? Is there anything that comes to mind?
There isn't actually. So like I said, I mean, since he was born in the first 1 year or so, when I needed a lot of these resources, I wasn't really in a condition to research a lot and find out what is the best thing I can do. I was more of, you know, going ahead with whatever I could possibly do, rather than what is the best thing out there that can be done. I don't know if this was personal to me or everyone goes through it, but my first 6 months really were a haze.
Yeah.
So it's good that whatever reading I had to do about parenting, I did during my pregnancy. I got a lot of free time at that point of time. Right up to 2 years old, even 5 years old, I think I ended up reading a lot.
Tell us some of that. What were some of the things that stood out for you in terms of what you were looking at? It was about sleep, or was it about like cognitive development?
It was mostly about the baby. Unfortunately, yeah. I had zero experience. I have not been around any cousins growing up or anything. So in the last 10 years of my life, I don't think I've even seen a baby more than once or twice. I don't think I've held. And I've never been
apart
very
from the
fond
movies.
of... Yeah, I mean, even in the movies, they don't really talk
show you,
about...
it's all the romantic version of it.
Exactly. So I felt very underprepared. Husband knew, like, he had raised, but he was in the same house while a cousin was born and being brought up. So he really knew everything. So I felt that, you know, information was my only way to go about it. So I read a lot, mostly about the baby, and I ended up reading about all the Western terms, postpartum depression. I was like, I'm not gonna have that.
Decided.
I read, I really don't know what I was heading towards. I thought, you know, I've never been depressed in my life. How can this happen to me?
Correct.
But a lot of these things were also medical, technical stuff. So like I told you earlier, I went to Google Scholar. I found published papers.
Peer
and I
reviewed.
cross-checked, proper papers in good journals. I cross-verified everything that was written in the articles. I found What to Expect is this website which has, they give references of wherever they've picked it up from. It's not just random things. And initially my parents and my in-laws were all like, oh, you're just reading it on the internet. You can't rely on it. Yeah, it's rubbish. Then I said, no. I'm making sure that what I'm reading does make sense. I went to good sites, reliable ones, and check that out. That has really been all. I feel that whatever I got from my parents was kind of outdated. So like in the initial month, again, I spoke to my mom just before delivery actually. She said, you should have a bucket full of water so that you can throw all the diapers in it. I'll throw the diapers in the dustbin. What do you mean? And then I realized that she was talking about cloth.
Yes.
And I had a whole discussion, like a whole almost fight about why I'm not going to use cloth. I'm going to use a diaper at least in the first month.
Yeah.
Because I have better things to do. And she said, no, diapers lead to rashes. And then I realized that, yes, 30 years back, diapers led to rashes.
Because they were really bad quality.
Yeah, but things have changed now.
Yeah.
So, similarly, I gave a pacifier to my son, and oh my god, I fought against everyone on that.
I have had that experience. I know exactly what you mean. It's the most evil thing ever.
Every random person, I went to a coconut lady who I was buying some coconut water for myself, and she came. She took the nipple out of his mouth and threw it on the road. She thought I gave it to him by chance. Like, how can that happen? How can you do that to someone else's kid? But people have very strong views against pacifiers in India.
Yeah, and you think we all have incredible teeth, but clearly that's not a thing either. I just don't know where it comes from.
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, a lot of mythology around pacifiers. Absolutely, diapers, pacifiers.
A lot of things.
Around pain medication for whatever reason. A lot of mythology around all of this.
And might be true, might not be.
I mean,
don't
there's
know what
history
it is,
there.
But since you're talking about resources, I would say that my resources, I try to be balanced. Well-cited articles and a bit of balance with what my pediatrician could tell me, and a bit of obviously whatever our parents said, because I feel that a lot of Ayurvedic stuff, or just things you should give to your kid 6 to 12 months are not really I feel India is ahead of the Western countries in some of these things. So it's okay to listen when there's no harm.
Correct.
It's also okay to listen to the grown-ups in the family and do what they are saying. So it has been a constant struggle between these two sources, but these are my biggest.
Absolutely, got it. In fact, this is a great segue into a couple of other questions, and that might sort of round out our overall discussion. What has been some of the best advice you got, right? Especially when dealing with those first 6 months, which are a mixture. Clearly, you've talked about how it was total shift in your identity, where you were a lot more angry than you've ever been, and it's not part of your inherent personality. Any advice you received then, or any advice you wish you'd received then, specifically for people who will feel what you're feeling, because the rage is real. It's a pathway to other things, and I know that depression is typically classified by a real feeling of hopelessness, right? And that's when you really know that you've entered that space of not coming back, and you probably need more formal forms of sort of treatment and being addressed. But yeah, what advice did you get, or did you wish you got, that you'd like to share with people who might go through the same thing?
I think the biggest point I wish I had got that is that it will end.
That it will
end. Yeah. So
it's not forever.
For me, it ended when I stopped breastfeeding him, which was when he turned slightly more than a year old. When, according to all the research I had done, you're supposed to shift them to cow's milk. When I stopped breastfeeding him, I kind of magically started to get much better. And just before that, it's darkest before dawn, we had kind of lost all hope that it will ever get better. I was starting to internalize that maybe this is who I am.
Who you are now.
And I faced similar questions from my friends. So one of my college juniors, he called me and he's like, my wife was so nice and now
What's
usko mata chad gayi hai. It really, it's not just rage. It's really like someone has possessed you and you've become a completely different
It
person.
sounds funny, but it's heartbreaking.
It is
It's
so
heartbreaking,
bad when it
yeah.
happens on a daily basis.
I've
it
been
can
that
strain
person.
all
I
your
know that.
relations,
I know
yeah.
exactly what that is.
So I think just knowing for the mothers as well as the fathers, knowing that it will end and it will get better, I think is the biggest thing. I wish someone could have, told me at that point of time, it will get better. Just keep hanging on to that hope.
And you don't judge yourself for who you've become or who you're being
Yeah.
at that moment. Absolutely, Neha. It's taking me back to moments of real, like, out of body experiences, where I too had my bouts of rage, and I think I definitely scared a few people. I definitely think my mother-in-law saw a version of me that she's never seen before. I probably came across to her as someone very difficult because I was just so angry. I was exhausted. I was sleep deprived, doing too much, trying to juggle too much. I'm just trying to think of who wouldn't feel this way, right? Like it is such a natural way to react. And as you were talking about the shift, when you said you stopped breastfeeding, I mean, what's happening inside our body is significant. There are significant hormonal changes from the time of birth right up to the point where you continue to breastfeed and wean your baby. There's a cocktail of hormones inside which play a very strong role in the way you feel. And most people think we're actually sort of putting this on, that we've chosen actively to be angry, or you've chosen actively, which is, I wish it was a choice because then you can turn it off, but it's not.
It really isn't. Yeah.
So I think your advice is so it's simple, but it's right, that it ends, which means that you can go through it and not judge yourself as much as you probably might. And I certainly did. I certainly looked at myself and felt like, who's this person? This kind of monsterish person every now and then who would surface. But realizing that it gets over, and then you can look back and be kind to yourself, and hopefully, sort of mend those bridges with the people you may have scared in the process.
One more thing. I also feel that this helps me understand my toddler's tantrums better now.
Oh yeah, so much
Because
more
they are
empathy
not,
and compassion.
they're not in control of that
Their
anger.
brain it's amazing how much toddler brain development is its own subject in terms of just not even having the basic machinery that you need. Your prefrontal cortex is nowhere near developed at that age.
Exactly.
So all your
You have no
emotions feel
control.
absolute and unadulterated. You have no consequence. You don't think before you act, right? And I totally understand what you're saying. Is there a myth that should be busted, that we should just get rid of apart from the pacifier part, of course? But what's a myth that we should do away with, right? Like, what is just not working and it should stop? I know there are millions of them, but if there was one you had to pinpoint.
So a lot of us feel that if we talk about our weaknesses, that makes us even worse as mothers.
Yeah.
So just the whole stigma about talking about the negative side of things is something which really needs to go away.
Absolutely.
That would be my biggest thing. If something would
very
be
well
changed.
said. Very well said.
Definitely.
I think talking about our feelings is a superpower because it is not repressing it, pushing it under the rug, pretending it's not there. May work for a little while, and maybe it works for some people, right? No judgment there. But there is so much strength in being vulnerable and addressing what you're going through and then learning from it, right? Which I think then prevents it from kind of happening again or happening in the intensity.
It also helps other people a lot. Like in the society, whenever I meet a new mom who's moved in or someone who's delivered, I think one of the first things I ask them, they're shocked. One of the first things I ask them
on the face.
It's not, it's not how's your baby doing. It's how are you doing?
Yeah.
Because I say fine. Like, how are you really doing?
Right.
You can talk to me. That's how I approach a new person I've never met before.
Absolutely. I have so much compassion for new mothers. I think their babies are incredible, but I think that they're as incredible as the baby they've had. For me,
sure.
if I had to share a myth I'd love to bust is this idea that we have to bounce back, that we have to become what we were, because we'll never be the same. I think we have to accept the fact that you're not bouncing back, you're bouncing forward,
Wow.
right? And for
So
me,
well
that
said, yeah.
it's saying you were something, you're taking her along, but you're also a couple of new things which are incredible. And why let go of that? I mean, it's a superpower to be
See, that
a
is
leader
growth.
at home.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I kind of wanna finish off this conversation, though there's so much that we can talk about for sure. Is to really delve into. We've talked about the hard parts a little bit. We've dived into really honest truths about your experience. But surely you've had some really happy, funny, laughable moments along the way, because there are many like that happen. Is there any like truly laugh out loud moment you've had where you really looked at yourself or your baby or your partner and were like, this is hilarious? Anything that happened that way?
There is one that immediately pops to mind. So this is when my son was slightly less than a year old.
Okay.
He had not yet started saying mama, papa. He was very comfortable with ka. So I think his first word was car.
Okay.
Because it was ka.
Yeah.
And then one day this kind of mumbling kid suddenly points to the floor and says cockroach. And there I realized on the floor there was a cockroach and he started running after it.
Wow.
And I didn't realize till then what a big issue. So the entire day after that we were just hoping that a cockroach would come out so that he would say cockroach again.
The stuff of nightmares. Which became a funny anecdote.
Yeah, but that also led to a game that I think is the best board game kind of that I've designed so far, which is cockroach versus chappal.
Oh
Because
my
I realized
God.
that people really, I mean, there's this relatable aspect of fighting a cockroach and going and hitting it. But it was
That was his
hilarious.
first word after car.
After car, yeah, before mama.
Wow.
And he still loves saying cockroach, although there are none in the house anymore.
Wow, that is such a story. It is literally the stuff of nightmares for me.
For you.
But I'm so glad that made you guys laugh.
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Neha. Hi, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Neha. I wanted to share some key takeaways from the discussion that I thought were really, really important. Remember, mom rage is not permanent. It can be triggered by many of the following, including severe drops in estrogen and progesterone levels, changes in your sleep pattern, feeling new emotions, a family history of depression or anxiety, and so much more. Think of ways to support yourself through therapy, your friends, family, and maybe even medical attention. Remember, preparation helps so much. We tend to focus on the pregnancy and ensuring that the fetus grows well, but you also have to take time for your own preparation in the journey ahead and avoid making assumptions about any of it. Think of books, podcasts, and even support groups. Remember, having a baby really does change us, so we do have to show up for ourselves and our little ones with grace and compassion. Think of many of the following suggestions, including using your friends and family for support. Remember, you are not alone. Taking time for yourself, even if it's 15 minutes every day to do something that reminds you of your old self, is so important. Don't be in a rush to bounce back, and remember, you can also seek support through counseling and therapy. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Bump In.